What if I told you that the greatest economic discovery in human history was not a blessing, but a curse? A poison pill wrapped in glittering silver. A fatal allure of infinite money that promised absolute power, but delivered only ruin. A curse so powerful, so insidious, that it brought the mightiest empire on earth to its knees, not with swords and cannons, but with the very wealth it worshipped. This isn't just a story from a forgotten textbook. It's a blueprint. A 5-stage pattern of economic self-destruction that has repeated itself throughout history, a cautionary tale whispered from the ghosts of fallen empires. And what if I told you that, 500 years later, the world's current economic superpower is unknowingly walking that same gilded path to oblivion? That we have built our own digital mountain of silver and are now suffering from the very same symptoms that preceded the fall of Spain. Most people today are worried about the final stage, the spectacular collapse, but they fail to see the real danger. The danger isn't the sudden heart attack. It's the slow, silent disease that corrodes the arteries for decades. The disease of easy money. In this video, we will dissect the Spanish silver curse stage by devastating stage. We will uncover how a nation that owned half the world's gold and silver managed to bankrupt itself 4 times over. And we will reveal why the cold, hard logic that toppled an empire of metal is now targeting an empire of paper and pixels. Stay with me, because this story is more about our future than our past. Our story begins in the early 1500s. Through conquest and exploration, Spain became the world's first truly global power. But their true jackpot, the event that would define and ultimately doom them, came not from discovering new lands, but from conquering old empires. The Aztec in Mexico, the Inca in Peru, and with them, the richest silver mines ever discovered by humankind. They had found it. The ultimate economic cheat code. A literal mountain of money. The legendary mines of Potosi in modern-day Bolivia were so vast, they would single-handedly double the entire supply of silver in Europe within a century. This is where our pattern begins, with a nation that suddenly finds itself in possession of what it believes to be an infinite source of wealth. From the mid-1500s onwards, the great Spanish treasure fleets hauled home over 200 tons of pure silver. Every single year. This unprecedented influx of wealth unleashed what historians call the price revolution across Europe, a century-long period of massive inflation, the likes of which had never been seen. Spain controlled an estimated 85% of the world's silver supply. Their currency, the mighty real de ocho or piece of 8, became the world's first global reserve currency, accepted from the markets of Amsterdam to the ports of Ming China. They believed their wealth was limitless. They believed they were exceptional. And that was their first and most fatal mistake. So, what does an empire do when it has a limitless checking account? It writes checks it can't possibly cash in the long run. King Philip II, ruling from his granite palace of El Escorial, waged wars on an impossible global scale. He didn't just fight one enemy, he fought all of them, all at once. There was the sprawling, decades-long 80 Years' War to crush the Protestant rebellion in the Netherlands, a conflict that became Spain's Vietnam. There was the constant, existential struggle against the Ottoman Empire for control of the Mediterranean. There were endless wars with France over territory in Italy. And, of course, there was the ill-fated Spanish Armada, a colossal expenditure sent to punish England. The costs were staggering. A single campaign could cost more than the entire annual shipment of silver. More than half of the crown's revenue was funneled directly into this global military machine. But it still wasn't enough. The empire's ambition had outgrown even its mountain of silver. When the war bills piled higher than the silver chests, the Spanish crown did what every failing empire in history does. It cheated its own people. It debased its currency. This was a silent, insidious tax. The mints in Seville and Segovia became factories of deception. They began secretly mixing cheap copper into their silver coins, particularly the vellon coinage used by common people for daily transactions. A coin that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75%, and eventually, some coins contained almost no silver at all. The face value, the number stamped on the coin, remained the same, but the real value, the intrinsic value of the metal, had evaporated. The result? Hyperinflation ravaged the domestic Spanish economy. People lost faith in their own money, hoarding the old, pure silver coins and trying to pass off the debased ones as quickly as possible. And then came the debt. They borrowed relentlessly from the great banking families of Europe, the Fuggers of Germany, the bankers of Genoa, mortgaging future silver shipments that hadn't even been mined yet. This created a horrifying doom loop, Borrow to fight wars to protect the silver fleet, use the silver to pay off old debts, and then borrow even more. By 1596, Spain had officially declared national bankruptcy. 4 times, 4 national defaults in just 40 years, while sitting on the largest pile of silver in history. The irony is staggering. And here, we arrive at the very heart of the curse. This is the stage that is most often overlooked, but it is the most crucial. The silver didn't just fail to save Spain, it actively destroyed its economy from the inside out. Because when you have infinite, easy money, you stop doing the hard work. You stop producing. You stop innovating. Why learn the difficult craft of shipbuilding when you can simply buy superior vessels from the industrious Dutch? Why invest in agricultural techniques when you can import cheap grain from Sicily with your silver? Why nurture a domestic textile industry when you can purchase the finest silks from Italy? Work itself became seen as beneath the Spanish nobility. A rentier class emerged, people who lived off rents and titles, producing nothing of value. The nation's manufacturing base crumbled. Its agriculture stagnated. All that incredible wealth from the Americas flowed into Spain, and then flowed straight back out to pay for foreign goods, financing the economic booms of its future rivals. Spain became a conduit, not a container, of wealth. The silver acted like a drug, giving the illusion of strength while the body's muscles atrophied. It produced almost nothing. It was entirely dependent on imports, and entirely dependent on a constant flow of silver to pay for everything. When the economic foundation rots, the social structure collapses upon it. And when the silver mines began to deplete in the 17th century, when the flow of the drug slowed to a trickle, the system went into withdrawal, and it was brutal. Crime exploded on the streets of Madrid and Seville. The Picaro, a literary figure of the wandering rogue and beggar, became a symbol of the era. The nation's brightest minds, its engineers, its entrepreneurs, its skilled craftsmen immigrated. They left for England, for France, for the Netherlands, nations that were building, creating, and growing. Spain was left with bureaucrats, soldiers, and priests, a nation of consumers and administrators, not creators and innovators. The loss of Portugal in 1640 was a devastating blow. The final recognition of Dutch independence was another. By the late 1600s, the Spanish Empire was a hollow shell, still vast on paper, but economically dead and politically impotent. From the world's undisputed superpower to a second-rate power in less than a century, today, the once mighty empire is a beautiful, cultured, but geopolitically minor country, a living museum. The curse was complete. You might think Spain was a one-off, a victim of its pre-industrial time. But the pattern is a virus. It adapts and finds new hosts. Let's fast forward 300 years to the British Empire, the empire on which the sun never set. London was the undisputed financial capital of the world. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency, its value supposedly inviolable, backed by gold. But Britain, at the zenith of its power, fell into the very same traps. Their military overextension wasn't just colonial garrisons, it was 2 cataclysmic world wars that bled the empire of its treasure and its youth. To pay for them, they took on staggering debt, mostly from a rising industrial power across the Atlantic, the United States. In the span of 30 years, the world's greatest creditor became the world's greatest debtor. Their currency debasement wasn't mixing copper into coins. It was the fateful decision in 1931 to abandon the gold standard, a public admission to the world that their pound was no longer as good as gold. Trust, once lost, is rarely regained. Their loss of productive capacity came after World War II, as its industrial base, once the workshop of the world, was old, inefficient, and swiftly outcompeted by restored German and ascendant American manufacturing. And their social unraveling manifested as the slow, painful, and often violent dissolution of their empire. The Suez Crisis of 1956 was the final humiliation, the moment it became clear to the world that Britain was no longer a superpower. The pattern played out again, just in a different dialect. So, now, with the weight of that history in mind, we come to today. Listen to those 5 stages again, and be honest with yourself. In 1971, the U.S. severed the dollar's last link to gold, effectively creating a global fiat standard. The dollar became the world's reserve currency, giving America what was called an exorbitant privilege. But the real flood began after the financial crisis of 2008. Through a sterile policy called quantitative easing, a modern, sophisticated term for a digital printing press, the Federal Reserve has expanded the money supply by trillions. Since 2020 alone, over $6 trillion have been created out of thin air, a sum larger than the entire GDP of most nations. We have our own Potosi. It's just made of pixels and located in a server farm. The U.S. maintains over 750 military bases in 80 countries. Its defense budget is larger than the next 10 countries combined. For decades, America has borne the cost of being the world's policeman, partly to secure the global trade routes that underpin the dollar's dominance. This has led to multi-trillion-dollar forever wars and security commitments that stretch our forces thinner than ever before in history. The mechanism is different, but the result is identical. The dollar has lost an estimated 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. That is the definition of debasement. Meanwhile, the national debt has surpassed $34 trillion, over 120% of our entire GDP, and is currently increasing by $1 trillion every 100 days. We now spend more on interest payments for our old debt than on many essential government functions. We are borrowing just to pay the interest. This is the classic definition of a sovereign debt spiral. For the last 40 years, driven by globalization and the pursuit of cheaper labor, America has offshored its manufacturing base. We excel at designing the iPhones, writing the software, and financing the deals. We are a nation of consumers, but we don't make things on the scale we used to. We run a chronic trade deficit of nearly $1 trillion a year. We are critically dependent on foreign supply chains for everything from life-saving pharmaceuticals from China to advanced semiconductors from Taiwan. Dollars flow out to buy goods made elsewhere, just like Spanish silver. We have checked 4 of the 5 boxes. The blueprint is almost complete. So what does Stage 5, the unraveling, look like in the 21st century? It's not beggars on the streets of Madrid. It's the slow, creeping decay of social trust. It's the bitter political polarization that has paralyzed our ability to solve even basic problems. It's a decline in life expectancy, a crisis of addiction, killing over 100,000 of our citizens a year, a pervasive sense that the system is rigged for the few at the expense of the many. It's the best and brightest questioning if the American dream is still alive, or if it has become a relic of a bygone era. And the economic finale of this stage is the loss of the world's reserve currency status. That's the final pin to fall. It begins slowly, then all at once. It begins when the world no longer needs or wants to hold our dollars to trade for essential goods like oil. When rising powers like the BRICS nations create viable alternatives and trade in their own currencies. When our biggest creditors become our biggest rivals. When all those trillions of dollars held overseas, no longer needed for global commerce, begin to flood back home, unleashing a tsunami of inflation that no central bank can possibly control. Many will argue, but this time is different. America is exceptional. We have technology. We have the world's best innovators. Spain had the best military technology of its day. The galleon and the tercio formation were revolutionary. Britain pioneered the Industrial Revolution, changing humanity forever. It didn't save their empires from the unbending laws of economics. This curse is not about technology. It's about incentives, debt, and production. And the laws of economics are as unforgiving as the laws of physics. You cannot print your way to prosperity. The Spanish silver curse taught us a timeless, brutal lesson. No nation can get rich by printing money. No empire can survive by consuming more than it produces. And no currency can maintain the trust of the world when it is created without limit and backed by nothing but promises. Understanding this pattern is the first step to navigating what comes next. It's not about predicting the exact day of a collapse. It's about understanding the direction we are heading and recognizing the historical echoes in the headlines of today. If this analysis has provided you with a new framework for understanding our world, then subscribe to Economic Echoes, because the answers to our future are not hidden in some secret document. They are written in plain sight, in the pages of the past, and together we will learn to read them.